Okay, good morning and happy Monday. This is Megan Pancoast here with your data collection tool on observation. So the first question talked about how would I describe the data collection technique and what processes and procedures are unique to this technique. So first off, observation in general is just when you are carefully watching and systematically recording what you're seeing or hearing happening in a particular setting. The setting that we're going to be talking about is specifically in our classrooms. So observations can be extremely useful, especially in situations where some of the other tools may not quite fit right, such as students' nonverbal reactions to different situations, and if students are working in small groups, how they interact and communicate with one another. So there are three main types of observation that were outlined in the text. For one, we are going to be participant observers in the classroom, which is if a researcher is genuinely a participant in the activity being studied, which as action researchers we are going to be because we are the teacher in the classroom. So an active participant observer is a teacher who's engaged in teaching and observing outcomes as the teaching happens and adjusts instruction accordingly to what the situation demands. We do this on an everyday basis. You may take the time to record observations in a systematic way throughout the school day, but it might not be as frequently as you will with some of the other ways. A privileged active observer is where the teacher kind of takes the role of a teacher's aide, where they're involved in interacting with the classroom, but they're able to take a step back and take notes. This would be if the teacher was going into another classroom, they were assisting with the activity that was being done, but they were not the lead teacher. And finally, the third type of observation is the passive observer, where the teacher no longer assumes responsibilities of the teacher and focuses purely on data. To me, this kind of reminded me of a principal during an observation in your room, or the text said that the one way it could be done was the teacher saying that today they're going to watch and learn from what the students were doing in the class and take a purely observer role rather than being the main purveyor of information. So the next question delved into, is it qualitative or quantitative research? And what types of questions would this technique best answer? In qualitative research, the data is given in a narrative form, so it's given in words specifically. Mertler stated that the data themselves are the words, meaning that there aren't really numbers in qualitative data. So some of the questions that it might be leading to, Mills said that the qualitative research was answering the question, what is going on here? So basically, what is happening in the classroom? It's one of the main tools for going about figuring out what the problem for action research would be. Some other questions that it might help to answer are questions that are meant to track behaviors or that can be seen or heard using our senses rather than through surveys and student collection. So there are three main types of observations, unstructured, semi-structured, and structured observations. Unstructured observations tend to be free-flowing and allow the observer to shift focus from one event to another event pretty easily. That's typically what we as teachers in the classroom are doing. Semi-structured observations, the observer has to attend to other activities that are occurring in the classroom, followed by intense periods of observation. So basically, they start something and then they take a step back and they take detailed notes over a series of time, whereas structured observations are purely the observer is doing nothing but observing the classroom, which we don't often have time to do as a teacher researcher in the classroom that we are mainly responsible for. What are some of the strengths with this data collection technique, and what are some of the weaknesses? Some of the strengths of observations are that the teacher is taking actual data on student behaviors instead of asking the students to report on their perceptions or feelings about a situation. So it's the teacher taking in things that are actively occurring in a classroom. It also allows the teacher to make observations on things students might not report themselves. So, different behaviors that students themselves may not notice or may not be willing to say about themselves for fear of some sort of punishment or ridicule. Some of the weaknesses of this study is the teachers taking the role as the data collector can change student actions within the classroom. Basically, when the student sees the notebook come out, chances of them getting kind of clammed up or to act better or act how they not normally act is much higher. So the teacher may need to wait extended periods of time to gather the data that they need to collect. Another thing that is a weakness is that if teachers are collaborating, they may observe different things that in an event, even if they're watching the same situation. So 2 teachers in one classroom watching a class activity, one teacher might interpret something different than the other teacher does. So the information that they're getting may not be the same exact information. And at times it does not provide enough detail on specific observations, or it may not follow the pattern that you are looking for. So one of the main things for observations in action research is that they're taken in the form of field notes. So typically field notes are set up on a left-hand, right-hand, with the left side being actual observations of the classroom and the right side being the observer's comments. This helps to kind of stop teachers from making inferences rather than observations at the start. So the actual observations, you use that area to write what you are observing specifically in the classroom. They must be as objective as possible. Objectivity in observations is the area that most concerns me, because if you're not objective in what you are viewing, you're not going to get accurate notes and you're not going to get accurate data, which will skew the study. As a teacher, you should not be afraid to record things that don't reflect well on you, because purpose of action research in general is to help improve you as the teacher. So noticing those flaws in your own teaching will really help to bring them to light later. On the observer comment side, you use it to write your interpretations of the observations. So they're going to be your first thoughts, your first inferences based on those observations you see. You can also use it to help track patterns in the data. And it also helps you to bring reflection into your teaching, which, as we know, is one of the most important parts of being a teacher. Some quick tips on note-taking. Mertler specifically said, stop thinking and just write what you see. That's because if you try to take in all of the information and observations, you are purely going to fail because humans are not capable of seeing every single thing that's happening in a room at one time. To kind of help with that, one of the things that was suggested is videotaping, which can help capture some observations. Specifically, if you're not working with a group or you're not observing a group, it might help to shed some light on what other groups may be doing. But some of the problems with that would be that the videotaping can only occur in one line of sight. They also suggest that if you're going to be writing observations down on a legal pad or a clipboard as you're going around a class, that you start carrying around with you several days before you begin your actual observations, to kind of get the kids used to you having it, so that hopefully they'll go back to their normal behaviors. Some of the concerns I had with this data collection is one, I worry that observations would have a bit of personal bias, because no matter how you view a situation, you're going to add your own bias into it. So it's really important that you specifically have 2 sides of the field notes, ones with the actual observations and ones with the inferences. The data can be variable from person to person. Like I said, one person watching the situation might see different data than you do. And finally, that sometimes important data may be overlooked or misinterpreted from the information. Thank you guys for taking the time to listen to my data collection on observations. Have a nice night.